The day my mother's lawyer called me into his office, I was still in my scrubs, fresh off a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I hadn't even had time to change. I sat down across from him, exhausted, and he slid a manila envelope across the desk toward me. "Your mother left you the farmhouse in Millhaven," he said. "The property at 4 Birchwood Road. About 180 acres total." I stared at him. "The old farmhouse?" He nodded. I knew exactly which property he meant. I had driven past it 100 times growing up, a sagging porch, a rusted weather vane, fields gone wild with goldenrod and thistle. My mother had inherited it from her own father and never once spoken of it with anything other than a vague, dismissive wave of her hand. "That old place," she used to say, like it embarrassed her. "My sister got the house we grew up in. A 4-bedroom colonial in Westchester with a finished basement and a 2-car garage. She got the investment accounts, the jewelry, the car. She got everything that looked like something. I got the broken-down farmhouse in the middle of nowhere." When I called my sister to tell her, she laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, delighted laugh, like I had just told her the funniest joke she'd heard in years. "Of course she left you that place," she said. "Honestly, it fits you perfectly. You always did like playing in the dirt." I didn't say anything. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked. Still smiling, I could hear it in her voice. "Grow tomatoes? Play farmer?" "I don't know yet," I said quietly. "Well, don't expect me to help you clean it out. That place is a disaster. Mom always said the roof alone would cost a fortune to fix." She paused. "You might just want to sell it for whatever you can get. I doubt it's worth much, but at least you'd walk away with something." I hung up the phone and sat alone in my apartment for a long time. I want to be honest with you, my first instinct was to do exactly what my sister suggested. Sell it, cut my losses. Walk away with whatever a rundown farmhouse on 180 acres of overgrown land could fetch and use the money to pay down my student loans. I was a 31-year-old ER nurse living in a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate. I was not in a position to be sentimental. But something made me drive out to Millhaven first. I went on a Saturday morning in early October. The drive took about 2 hours, winding up through the Hudson Valley, the trees just beginning to turn. I had the address pulled up on my phone and almost drove past the property twice before I spotted the old mailbox half buried in overgrown brush at the end of a gravel lane. I pulled down the lane slowly. The farmhouse came into view around a bend, and my chest did something strange and unexpected. It hurt, a little, but not in the way I expected. It was smaller than I remembered from childhood. The porch was sagging on one side, the paint peeling in long curling strips. 2 of the upstairs windows had been boarded over. The barn behind it had partially collapsed, one whole wall folded inward like a house of cards. The fields beyond stretched out in every direction, wild and completely untended, tall grass moving in the October wind. But the bones of the place, the old stone foundation, the wide plank porch boards, the maple tree in the front yard that must have been 100 years old, something about all of it made me sit in my car for a very long time before I got out. I walked through every room with a flashlight. The inside was musty and cold, but dry. The roof, despite what my sister had said, was holding. The kitchen still had the original cast iron sink. The wide plank floors, under years of grime, were solid oak. I went back the next weekend with a notebook and a tape measure. The weekend after that, I called a contractor. I trusted a man named Dave who had done work in our hospital's administrative wing and come highly recommended. I asked him to walk the property with me and give me an honest assessment. Dave was quiet for most of the walkthrough. He knocked on walls, tested floorboards, climbed into the attic, checked the foundation. When we were done, we stood on the porch, and he looked out over the fields. "Structurally, it's better than it looks," he said finally. "The bones are good. You'd need a new electrical panel, some plumbing work, fresh insulation. The barn's a loss, but the house itself I've seen worse that turned out beautiful." "What would it cost to make it livable?" I asked. He gave me a number. It was significant, but not impossible. Not if I was careful, not if I took my time. I drove home that night, thinking about it more seriously than I had allowed myself to before. 2 weeks later, I hired a local attorney named Patricia Walsh to help me go through the property records and the terms of my mother's estate. Patricia was thorough and methodical, the kind of woman who read every single line of every single document twice before she said anything. She called me on a Thursday afternoon while I was between patients. "I want to go over a few things with you," she said. "Are you somewhere private?" I stepped into an empty exam room and closed the door. "Go ahead." "The deed to the Millhaven property is clear," she said. No liens, no encumbrances. But there are a few things in your grandfather's original paperwork that I think you should know about. She paused. Do you know anything about the mineral rights on this land? I did not. Patricia explained it to me carefully. When my grandfather had originally purchased the property in the 1950s, the deed had included a full conveyance of mineral rights, meaning whoever owned the land owned everything beneath it as well. In many rural land sales, mineral rights are severed and sold separately. In this case, they never had been. I've done some preliminary research, Patricia said, and the Millhaven area has seen some interest from energy companies in recent years. There's a geological formation that runs through that part of the county. I'd recommend getting an independent geological survey done before you make any decisions about the property. I stood very still in that exam room. How much interest? I asked. Enough that I think you should know about it before you do anything else, she said. I didn't tell anyone. Not my roommate, not my coworkers, not my sister. I called the geological survey firm that Patricia recommended and scheduled an assessment for the following month. That was my first mistake, not acting fast enough on the legal protections. Patricia had mentioned it, gently, at the end of our call. You may want to consider filing a notice of ownership with the county and putting the property into a trust sooner rather than later, she had said. Just to be clean about it. I told her I'd think about it. I put it on my mental to-do list somewhere behind fix the porch railing and find a plumber. I should have listened. My sister called me on a Sunday in November, about 6 weeks after my mother's lawyer had first contacted me. Her voice was different than it usually was, lighter, almost warm. I've been thinking, she said, and I feel terrible about the way things were divided up. It really wasn't fair to you. I was immediately cautious. My sister was not in the habit of feeling terrible about things. I wanted to see if you'd be open to talking, she continued. Maybe trading. The farmhouse for a portion of the investment accounts, something more equitable. I'm not really looking to sell, I said carefully. I'm not talking about selling, she said, just a trade, between family, something that would actually benefit you. I told her I wasn't ready to make any decisions and I would let her know. 3 days later, I drove up to Millhaven to check on a small repair Dave's crew had started on the porch, and I found tire tracks in the mud at the end of my gravel lane tracks that were not mine. Fresh ones, from something larger than a passenger car. A truck, maybe. Or an SUV. I walked the full perimeter of the property that afternoon. At the far edge of the north field, I found 2 metal survey stakes driven into the ground that I had never put there. I called Patricia the next morning and told her everything. She was quiet for a moment. Don't touch the stakes, she said. Take photographs. Send them to me today, and I'm going to need you to come into my office as soon as possible. I drove down that afternoon. Patricia had pulled a set of documents that she spread across her desk: county records, a recently filed permit application, correspondence between a company called Redstone Land Resources LLC and the Millhaven County Planning Office. The permit application was for a preliminary land assessment on a parcel of property at 4 Birchwood Road. My address. The application had been filed 12 days earlier. The contact name on behalf of the landowner was my sister. I sat there reading the document 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. She filed as the landowner? I said. She filed using a letter that purports to authorize her to act on behalf of the estate, Patricia said. Her voice was controlled and precise. The letter claims to be signed by your mother. The problem is, and this is the part that matters, your mother's estate was closed. The property transferred to you at the time of closing. Your sister has no legal standing to authorize anything on this land. Where did the letter come from? That, Patricia said, is exactly what we need to find out. She had already prepared a cease and desist letter, which she sent to my sister and to Redstone Land Resources that same afternoon. She also filed an emergency injunction with the county to halt any further activity related to the fraudulent permit application, and she sent a formal complaint to the county planning office flagging the discrepancy in ownership documentation. Within 48 hours, we had a response from Redstone's legal team, acknowledging the dispute and suspending all activity on the application, pending resolution. My sister, on the other hand, did not respond to the cease and desist. She called me instead. The warmth was completely gone from her voice this time. You need to drop this, she said. I am trying to do something that would benefit this entire family, and you are being selfish and petty. You filed documents with the county claiming authority over my property, I said, using a letter that couldn't have been signed by Mom after the estate closed. You don't know what you're talking about. Patricia does, I said, and now so does the county. She hung up. What happened over the next several weeks was exhausting in a way that I did not fully anticipate. There were document reviews and depositions and a formal fraud investigation opened by the county. Patricia brought in a forensic document examiner who analyzed the letter my sister had submitted, the one bearing my mother's signature. His report was unambiguous. The signature had been produced after my mother's death, traced from an earlier document. The date had been altered. The entire thing was fabricated. My sister had forged my dead mother's signature to steal my land. The county referred the case to the district attorney's office. My sister retained a criminal defense attorney. There were weeks where I came home from 12-hour shifts at the hospital and sat at my kitchen table going through paperwork until midnight, too tired to think clearly, too angry to sleep. But I want to tell you about the other thing that was happening at the same time, because it almost got lost in everything else. The geological survey came back in December. The surveyor, a quiet, methodical man named Robert who drove up from Albany, spent 2 days on the property. He took soil cores and ran subsurface imaging equipment across the north and east fields. He sent his written report to Patricia, who called me the day she received it. I was at work. I stepped into that same empty exam room where she'd first told me about the mineral rights. "I have the survey results," Patricia said. "And?" "The news is good," she said. There was something different in her voice, careful, almost restrained, the way people get when they are trying not to oversell something. "There is a substantial deposit of silica sand on the northern portion of the property. The kind used in industrial applications, glass manufacturing, water filtration. Robert's assessment indicates it's commercially viable, potentially significantly so." I leaned against the exam room wall. "How significantly?" I asked. Patricia gave me a range of figures. I am not going to repeat the exact number here, because frankly I still have trouble saying it out loud without my voice going strange. But I will tell you this, it was the kind of number that changes things. The kind of number that makes you understand, all at once, why my sister had changed her tone on that November phone call, why the survey stakes had appeared in my north field, why she had been willing to forge a dead woman's signature. She had found out somehow, I still don't know exactly how, whether through a contact at the planning office or a conversation someone shouldn't have had, and she had moved fast, just not fast enough. I went back to Patricia's office the following week, and we filed the paperwork to place the entire property into an irrevocable trust. I also executed a formal licensing agreement with a reputable resources company, not Redstone, a different firm with a clean record for the right to conduct commercial extraction on the northern acreage. The terms were favorable. Patricia made sure of that. I also, finally, hired Dave's crew to begin the full renovation of the farmhouse. My sister's criminal case moved through the system slowly, the way these things do. She was ultimately charged with forgery of a legal document and fraud, both felonies. Her attorney negotiated a plea agreement. She did not go to prison, but she received a substantial fine and 3 years of supervised probation. She is permanently barred from acting as executor or administrator of any estate in the state of New York. I don't take pleasure in telling you that part. I want to be honest about that too. She is my sister. We grew up in the same house. There is a grief that runs alongside the anger, quieter but just as real. But I also think about that phone call in October when she laughed. I think about it fits you perfectly, and you always did like playing in the dirt. I think about the survey stakes in my north field and my dead mother's name on a forged document. And then I think about last spring, when I drove up to Millhaven on a Saturday morning and the farmhouse came into view around that bend in the gravel lane, and the porch was straight and solid, freshly painted a clean white, and the maple tree in the front yard was full of new leaves, and the fields stretched out in every direction in the morning light, and I sat in my car for a long time before I got out. Not because I was sad, because I needed a moment to take it in. I am still a nurse. I still work 12-hour shifts, but I spend my days off at the farmhouse now, and I am learning the names of the wildflowers that grow at the edges of the south field, and there is a family of foxes living somewhere near the old collapsed barn, and I have started keeping a garden not because I am playing farmer, as my sister once said, but because it turns out I like the dirt. My mother knew me better than I thought she did. The day she left me that broken-down farmhouse, she gave me everything.